From mechanical engineering to sneakers to apps, Kevin Bethune has done a lot. He's the author of a new book, Nonlinear, about his experience navigating design. And today he joins me to talk about the increasing complexity in design, the need for multidisciplinary collaboration, and maybe where things might go from here. I'm Andrew Hogan, host of Figbrew, and I hope you enjoy. Kevin, thanks for joining me. I'm just so excited that we were able to make this happen.
Oh, thank you, Andrew, for the invitation. I'm happy to be a part of Figbrew.
You've got a book that by the time folks see this will be out and available, Nonlinear. Feel free to show it if you want to show it. I knew he had it. Yeah.
From Nonlinear, Navigating Design with Curiosity and Conviction.
And this is your second book, or are there more than that?
So this is the second. It's not necessarily a sequel, but it's related to the first book, Reimagining Design.
I really enjoyed the first book. Enjoyed your talks. You've been a TED speaker and all those other things. And one of the biggest themes that I wanted to talk to you about, and one of the major reasons I reached out after I heard about the book and what you were tackling there, is the complexity of design projects and the way in which design has changed over your sort of career. And you've had a lot of personal reflections that have shown you sort of what the progression has been like. You're running your own studio now. Tell us a little bit about that. Like what's the progression been like? What have you seen? How has it changed?
You know, I found design mid-career, and I would say the first half of my career was heavily steeped in product creation across different disciplines, informing what physical product creation meant. But I would say maybe the latter half of my career, it skewed into digital, and, you know, having to find myself in runways where, you know, I had the privilege of serving growing teams that were sort of in situations where maybe the environment or the stakeholders around them didn't necessarily understand the full potential of creative problem solving and design's place within that. And so learning how to hire talent that might have skewed across, you know, industrial design to digital UX and UI, and definitely with digitization of most industries, creating a boom effect of just an enormous ocean of talent to pull into these emerging projects. It's been interesting to sort of be a part of. And then more recently, I think with some of the interesting volatility, economic headwinds, the rise of generative AI, I think there's a lot of questions and maybe some market corrections as it relates to the design field itself. So it's been very, very interesting times.
Yeah. I mean, so nuclear reactors, right? That was with like a Westinghouse.
Correct.
And then, you know, Nike, BCG Digital, some of the names there. What was different about building in the sort of earlier days and designing in the earlier days versus sort of more recently and some of the more recent things that you've been into? What have you observed about organizations?
My first professional chapter of career was in nuclear power, and I promise I'm not radioactive. If we were doing this in person, you'd be
We're
safe.
far enough away. It'll be okay.
But that was a world where the requirements were very concrete because of all the safety ramifications you can imagine. So to turn a screw, if that meant a design solution was turning a screw, you needed to have classical hand calculations justifying it. You needed to have empirical lab studies validating that. You needed to have computer simulations validating that. And it was a long march of engineering effort that would lead to a potential mechanical engineering design review in front of a panel of principal engineers, and then you then earned the right to move to the next step, and maybe it was fabricating hardware, show the evidence of how that stuff was meeting the requirements in front of a tribunal, and then you earn the right to maybe take that equipment and a trained crew to the field to an actual nuclear site that's owned by a power company or utility to implement said hardware. So we're talking about multi-month, multi-year engagements. And, you know, I would say the cool thing about engineering was that we were innovating on the fly, because every project, every nuclear plant you visited, despite what was on the architectural drawings, when you open that plant up for maintenance, there's all kinds of surprises. So you had to innovate on the fly. And even though the projects were long and arduous, sometimes those innovations needed to occur within a day to maybe save the schedule, to save the surprise, or to get a plant out of an emergency situation. So that was sort of the world that I came from as my first foundation. And then I get into, as you said, Nike, where now I'm entering a very heavily matrixed organization that's balancing all kinds of product categories, divided by geo, divided by the sport activity, divided by the type of product, whether it's sneakers or t-shirts. But digital was still sort of, at least the time that I was there, still on the periphery. There were early experiments with some of the teams with Nike Plus and the collaboration with Apple. Digitization was starting to creep in, and I was part of one of my day jobs was to help foster digital creation competencies in what had been an analog physical creation world.
So like making shoes, like how do you make shoes or shorts or other things like that? Okay.
Exactly, to really articulate design intent through the benefit of advanced digital creation competencies like 3D and virtual sampling, before you had to actually make that physical thing. That started speeding up the clock. So I got a taste of the faster pace of digital kind of through that experience. And then fast forward into finding myself in a small group of makers that informed BCG Digital Ventures, a group of multidisciplinary makers that were sitting small inside of a giant management consulting parent company. And we had the benefit of making solutions and businesses around those solutions for a lot of BCG's client relationships. And that was heavy digital because a lot of the BCG clients were interested in digital transformation and coming up with digital attackers to answer latent needs in the market. And so I got a healthy sense of what digital was like and having to hire for those competencies that were a little bit foreign to me from my physical making in the past. I had to get up to speed really quick to see how that talent could commingle with the other multidisciplinary cohorts in our engine.
You said multidisciplinary cohorts. Like who else is in that engine in that last part? And then what was the multidisciplinary, if any, relationships that you had in the nuclear power world?
Oh, goodness. So within the runway that BCG afforded us with digital ventures, I mean, literally at the early days of it, we were putting the wheels in the car as it's flying down the freeway and literally looking at the evidence trail of work before we knew what to even call ourselves. We looked at the evidence and said, oh, it's actually benchmarked as strategic design and experience design. And we had product management. We had engineering as a cohort. We had the last one was growth marketing before I left that platform. And every venture opportunity, we ring-fenced a team of constituents from each of those different cohorts. They informed a team. And then we said to BCG's client in whatever opportunity it was, we said, hey, client, we need you to send a few high potential people to live in residence with us in our studio so that we could go on an innovation journey together and then go incubate, build, and spin out a real company around that solution. So we were making things. These were real businesses that would succeed or fail, but everyone was learning tremendously in these situations. So I'm very thankful for that runway that was afforded us.
So you mentioned, design sounds like physical and digital design, product, engineering, subject matter experts from your clients. Who's involved in like working on a nuclear plant? Like, is it just the like engineering sort of folks, or were there a couple more as well? Just contrast those a little bit for us.
I think within the Westinghouse nuclear realm, it definitely was sort of a bifurcation of your business stewards that are brokering the account management, the commercial relationship with said utility, and then a wide variety of different engineering types. And yes, we call that process maybe design or design engineering as we went through the process to deliver on expectations. But, I was part of a team for the dominant time that I was there. It was called Mechanical Systems Integration, where we were all mechanical engineers. We were all very in tune to hardware. Within that, you could double click into, some of us were structural analysts that would evaluate the material integrity of something going through certain loads, and not just normal performance loads. We had to simulate and anticipate accidents. Could that component withstand earthquake level event or a catastrophic, loss of pressure, loss of power moment in a plant's life? The stuff had to be built to last to withstand all those different scenarios. So that was the sort of engineering cohort that I was a part of. And then when you get into fabrication, that introduces all kinds of different types of engineering talent and expertise.
I think the thing I'm wondering about is the shift and it's, it's hard because like your personal experience comparing like nuclear power to, I'm imagining like financial services
Mm,
incubation of like neobanks.
mm,
Maybe there were other sorts of ventures, but it just seems like there's sort of a progression from let's make these things and it's going to sort of be dictated. Here's how it's made. Here's what needs to happen. We're going to have a lot of checks. It's going to take a long time.
yeah.
We will probably have these little moments where things like are absolutely essential that we figure them out immediately.
Hmm.
And then you go into this sort of much more ambiguous, wide ranging, could be this, it could be this other thing. We might need this person who knows this about this other topic to weigh in. It
Hmm.
just all seems a lot less well defined. Um, and I can't tell if that is your progression, if it's
Mm.
the progression of the opportunities or if it's the progression of an industry of design, which has been asked to solve like increasingly less defined kinds of issues or problems. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I think it's a little bit of both. For me, in my mind, I sort of characterize it as a from to. I think the first half of my career was in large platform organizations like the Westinghouse Nuclear and the Nike, where, in some cases, a new initiative, a new growth initiative required a waterfall set of handoffs. Waterfall meaning like you might work with a strategy team, a commercially oriented team for a while, cooking the hypothesis or the idea of the opportunity and crystallizing the opportunity definition. And then that would move into some design or engineering phase of like actually creating the thing. And then there's that set of implementation phases. And so it might, in that waterfall sort of world, it might be a year or 2 years before you actually have something that you can hold up and put in front of stakeholders and test versus the latter half of my career where the speed of the clock is only getting faster thanks to digital. To your point, our present moment, the complexities of problem solving and how we can show up, and usually now it's a mixture of software-based solutioning in tandem with some notion of a tangible affordance of some, and sometimes even a human service, or maybe an AI-derived agent service that kind of comes in and the customer doesn't care what, but they need to feel a holistic experience that's coming to meet them where they are in their journey and their circumstances. And so the complexity is exponentially increased and the speed, we can't necessarily tolerate in today's times waiting for those long, arduous handoffs anymore. And I can imagine my old friends, even in Westinghouse Nuclear, are probably having to do things very differently than what I remember doing in today's
Yeah.
times.
And then the thing that strikes me about this is both the environments where it's good to have the kind of ambiguity and the acceleration and um, and welcomed, right?
Mhm.
Like the creativity and how we could solve this in any number of permutations and ways, and let's try it all. And the people who also tend to sort of enjoy those environments versus environments where it's actually more welcome to have like, I want this by this time and I want it to look like this and I want it to look like that.
Mm.
It's interesting because it seems like a tension for some individuals at whether they are going to accept and tolerate this.
I can imagine certain industries and certain disciplines within those industries require a feeling of stability of like, okay, we're marching along a proven and tested beat, and we know that outcome is going to be hitting the mark. And if that's the case, I think a lot of companies, within a lot of industries, need their core platforms to be predictable, metering along in a stable sort of way. But at the same time, I think if we have sort of an innovative mindset that looks to the future, eventually the core platforms that got us here are going to probably mature in some way. They're going to decline. Maybe the value criteria of the stakeholders that have been served by those things, maybe their values sort of drift to a new place. Maybe there's a buildup of latent needs that the core platform is not addressing right now.
So you mean your customers? Your customers essentially start to say, "I'm looking for something different," or start to realize they're looking for something different. There's some change that
Yeah.
forces an organization. Yeah. What advice would you have for folks that find themselves in more rigid environments when they want to think non-linearly, they want to approach this in a different way. And I'm, what's worked for you maybe won't work for them, but I'm also just curious, like what your approach would be.
I definitely, just because I wrote a book, I don't profess to have all the answers in all these situations.
All the answers from Kevin.
Oh, that's trouble. But I would say, by the notion of nonlinear, I'm not suggesting that teams divorce themselves of deadlines, of systematic processes. I'm not suggesting that at all. What I am saying is, be mindful to your core platform. There's fundamental mechanics that need to be respected, and we need to be able to ship and hit the OKRs, KPIs, all the metrics you can imagine around what success looks like for that. But again, if we do stick our necks up and look at the distant time horizon ahead of where the core platform is going, in a fast-paced world that's moving from the linear to the exponential to the nonlinear, value criteria is going to be moving around. Stakeholder mix of people are going to be moving around. And you do need to track the resonance of who it is you're claiming to serve. And maybe there's folks that you have yet to serve. And you got to be able to have your pulse on what's happening with them too. What if, a technology emerges that disrupts what's happening in the core? The core has to mature at some point. We have to almost breed that paranoia, not an anxious paranoia, but a healthy paranoia around, well, what got us here is going to mature. So what is next? So in parallel with the thing that you're respecting, especially when it comes to innovation, to get anything new and novel, to eventually get commercialized to replace what's maturing, we got to be prepared to do things differently. And all I'm trying to do is shine a light on the creative nuances, the creative choices, especially as it relates to multidisciplinary teams becoming more of the norm, and trying to understand design's place within that. We need to elevate the understanding of what design can bring to the table. It brings a number of interesting choices that don't follow, a repeatable sprint playbook that you just rinse and repeat and expect innovation at the other side. Instead, let's recognize the forest of ambiguity for what it is. If I'm here today in this moment, I have maybe a limited amount of information. I have some choices that I can make based on the information that I have to go find new information that I don't have, whether it's through prototyping, ideating, discovery. Let me make those appropriate choices. That's a blend of, art and science to learn something new. And then I can hold up new evidence to inform my next step. And then my next step. And some of those steps might be sideways, backwards, accelerate forward, and that's okay. And eventually that innovation muscle, as it works, we will generate things that are proven and tested that will then slot into what is the core and inform the core to make it better and more evolved.
So, essentially asking people, if you would like to grow non-linearly, if you'd like to take advantage of, exponential changes, maybe it's agentic AI, in the near term, maybe it's, physical AI, if you believe NVIDIA's sort of like up chart, you've got to take us like one look around a little bit more and be a little bit less focused on, incremental step-by-step progress. But it also sounds like you're asking people who lead in these organizations to recognize the opportunities that could exist. And then also the sort of like, it might not feel like all of the things that you're used to it feeling like.
Yeah, feeling is a big deal. If you're nurturing that innovation muscle and you have an eye to have some degree of future foresight, spending some calories on future while you're being respectful to the short-term things you need to ship tomorrow, you got to be prepared to give your team some autonomy to go find their way. Now, granted, you have an agreement of like, on this date, we all show up at the meeting with, what did we learn? Have that expectation where there's a deadline, sure. If you're trying to hold stand-up meetings daily, expecting your team to march along an innovation beat against a prescribed formula of formulaic steps and expecting an outcome out the other side, then we're setting ourselves up for failure.
So what are some phrases, if you're a leader, like what are some phrases that you would be like, these are good things to say, or this is like helpful for encouraging the team? And then maybe what are some phrases that are, it sounds like one of them is, every day at the stand-up, show me the progress that you've made. That's maybe not helpful. Any like, what is some of your consulting engagements sort of taught you about giving leaders the kind of coaching that they need?
Yeah, it's, week to week. And like literally the rhythm for me and my work lately is definitely It runs by weeks, not days. I kind of steer clear of that daily minutia, but I say like, okay, we're together, fellow founder, fellow leader. What did the team learn last week? Well, how is it those learnings different than what we expected from our initial work plan? And how can we break the work plan to go learn what we really need to learn this next week? And let's get everyone aligned around the next surge of effort. Maybe it's making something. Maybe it's going back out in the field. Maybe it's futures week and we need to collect and curate what we think might matter to our stakeholders in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, making it up. How do we inform the team room? When we build the next stakeholder communication, why do we have to build a PowerPoint deck? Maybe we create an immersive experience for our stakeholders to go through. Maybe this next week is a time for us to be generative, like nonlinear in terms of pulling disparate inputs and seeing how people like the act of putting new stories together of possibility and informing concepts. And these are things that, against maybe preconceived expectation, I've been a part of runways where we took some risks, and sometimes we had to fight to take those risks. Oh, just because we were in the field last week, maybe we're still not ready to hand over the insights, page on a slide. We need to let the team actually cook for a few days and really comb and codify the things that they've uncovered and observed, because maybe they don't see the patterns yet until they get a chance to just digest it.
So it sounds like it's like asking, pushing for more time in places where you can. That just seems like always helpful. And then it also sounds like asking, is there something different that we learned or that we should be doing? Mm-hmm. And that, like, it seems like those questions are sort of like good places for leaders to go to try to help teams create some new paths.
I could see it in some of those leaders that you mentioned. When we look across the table, look people in the eye. I think certain leaders are probably tired of, okay, we might have asked you for these things or expect these things, but if you show up to the meeting with the formulaic outputs that they're expecting, and there's no real substance around that's going to really lead to an outcome that they care about, it's nothing but the worst to see the sleep fall over their eyes.
But the risk, I mean, we talked earlier about like the things that people expect to see, right? You're going to do this, you're going to do it this way, and then we're going to see this, and then the slide's going to show up, and then we're going to have these 3 bullets that like govern the, you're laughing, but like the risk that this sort of like invites, because if you come in and you say, I'm going to do something really different, we're going to walk you through an experience and we're not going to show you any slides. And that person on the other side who's maybe controlling the budget, you check in with them every few months, let's say, if it's that kind of project, it could really go sideways. And mm-hmm. I think there's something to how people leading organizations show up and how they invite this kind of thing, mm-hmm. Rather than kind of the meeting is going to go like this and we're going to see a prototype that iterates on the last prototype that we saw.
I honestly think, regardless of whatever the brief is, whatever the expectation is, it's always worked out well, at least in my experiences and observations, when we got laser focused on the reality affecting the stakeholders. And it could be target audience, it could be end customer, but it could also be your teammates even. Like they have value criteria. We need to make sure our teammates are feeling good about where we're going and they feel invested. So if we're looking people in the eye, we care about who we're serving ultimately, and we're asking hard questions about how do we do a better job at that. That helps us find those anchors where we can make intuitive choices that don't feel too risky.
So what are some specific questions or ways that you can kind of unlock what's the value criteria, what's the thing that this person is really looking for? Like, what are some, if you feel like you're in this project where you're like, you're headed towards, findings on a slide, and you don't think that that's really going to get you anywhere, what are some ways you can like earn the permission to take some risks?
It might involve some early discovery, and by that, I don't mean just like firing up a bunch of interviews just to say we did it, because again, that's very outcome focused, but like working really hard at the outset to maybe find the things that matter to that person that we haven't really heard people talking about. Because at this point,
this is like a stakeholder or someone, find what matters to that person.
Yeah, and usually it's never just one person; it's a constellation. So even that, to your point, like a lot of teams might be so focused on what they believe their target audience is by the one or few personas that represent their customers. Let's just say it like that way. But usually it's never just them. There's other actors. If I'm serving a restaurant business, it might be the waiter, but there's also the cook and the manager, and there's other stakeholders that have value criteria that they hold dear, that what matters to them. To quote one author, Indy Young, I almost don't care what your product or features are. I just want to know what cognition is running behind the scenes with that person. What is their context? What are the contradictions between their aspirations and their concrete realities that are just sources of friction of getting in their own way, and they maybe they don't know how to articulate that that's a contradiction and that's a problem, a constraint. So like mining deeper into what makes that person tick, what matters, and eventually distilling those key values that represent their reality. Like when you paint that picture for someone different, that's usually looks very different than the existing market research that they might have had on their audience or the existing segmentation, and how you can illustrate that set of attributes, it can be very powerful to move the room in a different direction.
The one thing I've observed, and I'm curious what your reaction is here, the more you see that stuff in person, especially, but at least like on a video, the more powerful it is. And if you read it, or if it's told to you, or if it's
Yeah.
frameworkized, or if
Yeah.
it becomes like basically the more synthesized any of those things get, the less punch they seem to have. What do you think about that?
No, I totally agree. I more recently, some of the projects I've been a part of over the last 5+ years, in the spirit of opening the aperture, and whatever topic it is, whatever hypothesis might be on the table to pursue, I'll go try to find a real person that's almost forging the way ahead themselves. They're already in that space, they're already in that topic area, they're already hacking their way forward. You could call it an early adopter, but especially as the world continues to converge and we've got to deal with content, community, products, services, all these things crashing together in this multidisciplinary world. Usually there's a set of actors, he or she or they are out there, and we got to find them. Like who's already got credibility, and look at ourselves with humility, saying we don't have the credibility yet, we don't have the inroads yet in that space. We can have the best hypothesis in the world, but there's probably someone already scratching. Let's just go find that person and include them in the team, in whatever relationship. Call them a subject matter expert, but I raise them up on a pedestal and I bring them to the team and use creative ways to find them. But when I bring them to the team and just let them unpack, the teams 9 times out of 10 are just blown away because they're talking about things that the team has not talked about.
Anybody come to mind that you've, I don't want to breach any confidentiality with your clients or anything, but I'm just curious, like who are the kinds of people that you're finding, and what kinds of communities are they?
Yeah, no, without giving away anything, like wellness is a common topic of
Yeah.
opportunity, especially as we navigated the pandemic and
Yeah.
after. I through serendipity, I happened to meet a gentleman by the name of Punacha Makaya, who has sort of been like Deepak Chopra's right hand teammate. This guy comes from the startup world, both Silicon Valley as well as startup activity in India. He knows all kinds of interesting ingenuity and innovation that's happening in different pockets of the world. He is a master. I could sort of describe him as a master futurist around where holistic wellness needs to go. He's foraying in mixed reality and things before it became sort of a common topic a few years ago. He was doing that for a while, and I pulled him into projects sometimes. We're talking about wellness, like no one better that has been down this road so many times before than someone like Punacha. Let's listen to him before we talk about a product or a hypothesis. Just like let him unpack what's going on with the people that he's already serving in an authentic way.
That makes sense. And then he can speak to it. And it is true. It is much easier to find essentially these, like, like interests, personal interests. Like the internet has made it fascinatingly easy to get deep into a community, to find the people who are influential to that community now, much faster than it used to be.
Yeah, and it's less hard than we think to go approach someone that's authentically doing something, because people love to talk about what they do, and
Right.
so if companies look outside of themselves and out of their team walls, you can engage people authentically and create a relationship.
We've talked about a few different things. We've talked about, trying to figure out how to move in a nonlinear fashion and how you have to sort of raise yourself up above. And we talked about some of the shifts, technological shifts that are making the clock go faster. There's one concept that I had raised to you when we were talking about this, of design energy. Just the idea that there's sort of like areas of emphasis where there's a focus, and I had raised this partially because I had found some data that industrial designers had been expected to grow in 2007 2008 from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, and that they had not grown in the same way that was expected over the next 10 years. But then instead there had been all these different disciplines growing around digital design, and certainly the use of the word, personas and journey maps and all these things that used to be like really confined to a small group of people now became something that a lot of people cared about.
Yes.
And so this design energy concept, what do you think about that? I brought this up to you. I actually don't know what your sort of like response or feeling is about it. Are you buying it? Are you a seller on that concept?
I do think it's been a vacillating pendulum, and that maybe in the best ways. I think to your point around industrial design, yeah, that may have been the forecast, but I think in our previous conversation, you raised the advent of the iPhone definitely changed a lot. Arguably the same, Android equivalents, where software, quote unquote, ate the world. A lot of the objects that we thought were essential became part of our sort of device, our one device. And nowadays, to invest in physical, tangible affordances, there definitely needs to be a very strong reason for being. Ensure we're not creating a sustainable nightmare, in the act of making something physical. But I think digital, even though it exploded the talent pool in terms of like design collective growth, in some ways, especially as I've had to nurture talent across the physical and digital spectrum of design, digital unfortunately has fragmented design so much, and that it's like, okay, what type of product designer am I talking about? And what is sort of the breadth and depth of skill set that make up that person? Are they gifted in UX, IA? Are they really good visual designer or not? Where's their value to be applied? So combine that with the level of design maturity being different across different industries and organizations. I think unsurprisingly, when you approach an economically volatile period, especially like the last 24 months at least, it raises questions. And design is not immune. It will be vulnerable to certain market corrections, and unfortunately, we've seen that, where a lot of our digital friends, there's so much talent on the market looking for limited jobs. But what I am bullish about is the convictions that I think matter to people that we claim to serve. It's like, how are we not just like thinking about a digital first market funnel, so that I expect you to kind of click to convert eventually, click to buy, and I hope to keep you through retention. Like, okay, sure, those metrics might be important, but I think we need to have more rigorous conversations about how do we actually show up for the stakeholders that we are claiming to serve in their context and their circumstance. So I'm when I problem solve, I'm less market funnel. I galvanize on moments of truth. How are we showing up, offering utility that matters, whether it's through physical atoms or electrons or human services, AI agent services? I really don't care. It's like, what's the full breadth of ingredients where we can make nonlinear choices to craft something that has meaning and helps that person in their circumstance? I don't find the collective large swath of the business world is having enough conversations to go there. And that will validate what the next gen physical devices need to be, the next gen software and or AI. I mean, AI might eat a lot of things that we take for granted now, but that opens us up to go learn new things or to elevate the impact from creative problem solving itself, critical thinking itself, so that we figure out the most intuitive way to holistically show up for people.
So you've got this um, an expectation of more multidisciplinary. We've got this sort of like disruption with generative AI. You've got this acceleration of the clock, and you've got this opportunity, it sounds like, to create moments where people can create real meaning and are craving it. I think you use the word stakeholders. It's a really interesting way. I had kept saying customers and markets, and I noticed you've carefully called them stakeholders, because they're not just internal; they're external. The person using the app is also a stakeholder. So is that the future you see? This like essentially a world of increasing complexity that needs to be kind of like stitched together into powerful moments and experiences, and we just have more tools than we had before?
My hope is that we, figure out how to make the tool sets we use the most efficient, and we're less fixated on a tool or a particular platform, that we can be sort of agnostic. But again, it's like these are all ingredients. How do we show up meaningfully and do it in a way where that person feels like the hero? It's not us touting our product. It's just like, and if we do that well, the business concern will take care of itself. It's like, how have I provided new utility for that person, where it's like they're ready to abandon what they were using before because my utility is so much better in a data rich world, because we're navigating so much information being impinged on us, and granted, AI is coming in to synthesize and offer that clarity.
The synthesis is always interesting to me because I look at it and I'm always like, well, I just lost everything. Like all the corners have been rounded. This is exactly what I would expect to see from an average of everything. And then you got to if you do the work, you usually get some differences.
Yeah.
But I like, then your job is picking out the differences too. Anyway, sorry, slight tangent in working with this.
But no, it's a good discussion. But I think the short answer is, ultimately, what is the story that person can hear, feel, touch, see, interact with in all their full senses, and believe that new story that we put in front of them, call it an experience, is right for them to pick up. And if we showed up correctly and in a way that derives meaning and value, and we're also mindful of the intended as well as unintended consequences of the decisions that went into that, then we have a relationship. I think about an old exemplar, but the shelving system behind me is, Dieter Ram's work with Vitsu, and it's like, you keep Vitsu shelving for life. If I move, I take that with me, and I can scale it, and it's super sustainable. And it took me forever to wait for the product to arrive at my home, and that was okay because of all the benefits that now put me in a part of Vitsu's sort of world, because it's part of my world and it has meaning. It's one of my favorite products for that reason, because they stood by certain convictions. There's a story that I want to be a part of, versus I buy a set of shelves and I know in like 5-10 years time it's probably going to break, and I got to buy it again and again and again.
Yeah. I'm trying not to look behind me in my shelves. I mean, I think, but you're right though. I don't have no relationship with the shelves behind me. And
but this is a no judgment shelf zone.
No. I said it. You didn't say it. I don't even know if you could see the shelves. But I think there's really something to this. Like, are you trying to build a relationship? Are you trying to just get a transaction? Are you trying to create meaning? There's a lot to be said. There's a lot of opportunity. And I know in Nonlinear, there's a huge focus on qual, and there, earlier you talked about like expertise from within communities who are already sort of like working on it. What are the other like ways of unlocking like where this meaning could come from? If you are a person working on a product and you're how do I create more meaning with this? How do I make this person a hero? What are the things that you think they should be doing, maybe that are different than what they're doing today?
Yeah, I mean, one simple example is, sometimes we use rubrics that help shake our mind out of the convention and the formulaics of our existing world. So day to day, we might really care about certain products and features for good reason that need to ship tomorrow. Again, we have to respect that. But in a spirit of showing up for someone holistically and intuitively, I might consider a framework like poems, where it's like, I'm going to interrogate a bunch of concepts around like, what are the people that could show up for that person? Is there an ecosystem of people? The P in poems.
Yeah.
O is like objects. What objects? E is like environments. M is messages, because we're all getting pinched with messages all the time. Qual and quant. And what services? The S, like what services could be had? And it's like, again, all in the language of showing up for that person and what they're going to engage when they navigate their reality and their context. And we've talked in that language. There's a mental shift around stakeholder first versus ourselves first.
And stakeholders being the external person too, which again is still, stakeholder often means, your boss, the person approving the project, the person, who greenlit an entire transformation. And you're talking about a person and finding the opportunities to help them and find things be more meaningful. It seems like an excellent shift for folks to try to sort of create in the places where they can and where they can have the right conversations, or create for their teams. Mm-hmm. Because I think, there's a big opportunity here if you're leading an organization to ask questions about this. Who are the other actors in this? What are the other objects? Who's the expert, from the community who we can bring in onto this team?
It makes me remember too, like the client CEO, right, that would come to a BCG office or even come to our digital venture studio. Like that person probably, he or she or they probably don't have the time to sit through a 100-page PowerPoint deck on all the things that we did and all the outputs that we created to, appease that we did all the work well.
That word appease too.
But instead, like early on, we learned how to make movies for that person. Like through motion design, we made a 2-minute highlight reel. That's the venture narrative. The problem, the solution, the potential impact, or the feedback that we already got from early tests from people out in the field. You get it in a 2-minute story. That CEO can then carry that Vimeo clip to their next meeting and play it and have everyone galvanize.
An excellent artifact for that purpose. I would wonder, though, whether that person then has the understanding you would want them to have. But I also don't see another path forward here. So that, you know what I mean? Like the alternative is that person is then trying to be immersed in that community, and they just can't. Yeah. You have to trust the team there.
Exactly.
Kevin, amazing to talk. Any last messages for what you want people to take away from this book?
Yeah, I think with both books, but Nonlinear is just another reinforcement. My lived experience served as the frame, the foundation of any innovation perspectives I could offer. Because again, I hope that people don't take from my books like that it's this pedagogical answer. All the answers are here, and I'm the authority on a pedestal. That's not the perception I want to give. I really want people to dive into my books just to hear what one man has gone through in his journey through corporate America and some of the early experiences of what it unfolded. But it's rooted in lived experience for a reason, because I want to hold up a mirror so that readers can see themselves a little differently in someone's story. And I think you only get that when you bring the humanity, the full humanity, with the perspective of what we're trying to introduce as nonlinear choices. Anytime for anyone listening that you're around the table with a multidisciplinary team looking to embark on an innovation journey to find that new thing, whatever it is, just know that you are so much more than the title on your business card, that your full humanity, like the relationships you have, the culture you come from, that those differences, those just like fingerprints are so different. Those infinitely different differences have incredible value when you begin to bring that out. And ideally, you create a safe environment where the team feels compelled. But everyone should bring their full self into the sausage making, I believe.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for watching, everybody. And the book is available now.